very happy to see you all and that we meet under the circumstances. Thank you very much to the School of the Freudian Letter for hosting this event. I thought that it would be very interesting to talk about the feminine today, as we had some previous seminars that had to do with the structures, and one of them was mentioned as the hysterics and feminine jouissance in the past. So we had a promise there that we would continue somehow in the future with the feminine issue. So that was what gave me the idea to have this seminar today. I would like to suggest that what I thought in the beginning is that it would be more interesting to have something like a discussion. I mean, because I think that Zoom seminars can be very they can be very depressing because there is not the presence of the body. So I would prefer to have a livelier seminar with the presence of the voice. So feel free at any time to ask or to participate in any way. And I would like to start with the abstract that was given to you for this seminar. I'm trying to do my best in English. I apologize in advance if I take a longer time than when we did the seminar in Greek. So what was mentioned in the abstract that I sent you was that feminine jouissance is very much of great interest for psychoanalysis. And first of all, that is something that has to do with the history of psychoanalysis. That is to say that hysterics were the first that transformed Freud's desire to the desire of the analyst. We had the circumstance back then, and there were many doctors before Freud that were trying to understand what happened with women of that time that were complaining and that were trying to speak, trying to talk to someone. They were trying to make someone understand what their symptoms were about. And back at the Victorian time, where everything started, we had very impressive somatic symptoms, and that's what named the hysterics as hysteria, and that's where the female neurosis got its name from. So what Freud tried to do, and that is what distinguished him from the analysts of the time, because there was still no analysis back then. There were doctors that were trying to understand what was happening with hypnosis, and Freud was doing some research, and as Lacan would mention later, what made psychoanalysis happen is that Freud tried to listen to the female neurosis, so that way he could construct it, and that way, and that is what distinguished him from his partner, that Lacan tells us that he fell in love with a patient. You might have heard about the case of Anna O and her analytic history with Breuer. So what Lacan tells us at the seminar about transference is that Freud's desire was not the desire for love. It was desire for knowledge, for the truth. And that is why he, on the contrary, he didn't fell in love with the patient. He tried to listen to her and to other hysterics. So, as Lacan tells us later, the female neurosis hysteria is trying to make the master produce a truth. Lacan mentions it that very later on the 17th seminar, but there are traces and that help us understand the history of psychoanalysis from the beginnings. So that is what transformed Freud's desire. That was the desire to understand. He was a doctor. He was trying to understand what was happening. And he tried to find a way for the patient to talk. And he began to write down what the patients were saying. And they found out that the somatic symptoms were not real and that they went away with the talking cure, as it has been described in some circumstances. So what we see here is that Freud was very much interested from the beginning with the feminine, although it was not easy to understand. Despite that, he tried to listen to the patients, and what we can say here is that he transformed them into analysants. He transformed them and into speaking beings. He transformed the subject, and he made the subject exist at the process of the psychoanalytic procedure. I'm just noting that because it has been very often discussed about the famous quote that Freud said that I cannot understand what a woman wants, and it is very famous, that quote. So what we need to see here is that despite he couldn't understand what was going on with the feminine jouissance and with the feminine, and he admitted that, although he made a very decent effort to hear and to try to understand what was at stake. That is very important because we have very many descriptions in the early works of Freud and in the works of especially the description of the hysteric neurosis that was described in the case of Dora. And it is very difficult because Dora left Freud, and she had a brief therapy with him, and therapy was one of the many names of analysis at that time. And Freud was left wondering why she had gone and had ended analysis just like that. And what we see here in the desire of Freud is that he could have left Dora, he could have left her be forgotten because she left him. So it wasn't a very successful case. But what is interesting here is that the desire for the truth that was very, very intense in Freud's work, and he tried to understand why Dora left the analytic procedure. So he took all of her sessions and tried to write them down. And that is what has given us the very, very first description of the hysteric neurosis. We have other incidents and we have other descriptions of hysteria on the very early cases that he and Breuer tried to understand, but still, this was the very first session that we have an analytic desire and a hysteric desire. So it is the very first. And what is important is that he gave us something that Lacan later on tried to he tried to translate it in a way. So it was a very decent attempt to hear and understand not only hysteria, but the feminine as well. But it was very difficult because he didn't go very far with the feminine. It is very oftenly described that in Freud's work, one of his many thoughts had to do with what should we do with hysteria and what should we do with the somatic symptoms. One of them was motherhood. It was oftenly described that, for example, motherhood had a very larger place than the analyzants were asking for. So at the late of his work, Freud admitted that he could not go very far with the feminine situation. And that is what is described in the very famous quote that I don't want what a woman wants. I don't know what a woman wants. Later on, there have been many voices that were trying to question what Freud was telling about the feminine, about hysteria, about women in general. And because of that, there were very many analytical, I don't know how to say it in English, there were many analytical disagreements on what Freud said in the beginning, and it was one way or another something that made people a bit more questionable about analysis. They made them question the psychoanalytical process in general. However, we are very lucky that we had the work of Jacques Lacan, because Lacan indeed tried and achieved going much more further with the feminine issue. Not only by listening as an analyst, but also with his own work and with his own confession as an analyst. And further on, there are many voices and female voices, analysts that are talking about what is at stake at the feminine. So to begin with Lacan's work, as you all know, Lacan had Lacan's work is divided into the early seminars that that are often referred as the early Lacan, and after the 17th seminar up till the 23rd, it is mentioned as late Lacan. I'm just referring it because what we need to understand here is that concerning the feminine issue, and we're not only talking about women, we're talking about the feminine jouissance. It also had to do with the way that his own analytical procedure, not only as an analyst but also as an analysant, had to do. So to begin with, on the early work of Lacan, we see at the first seminars, we bear witness to him trying to understand what was going on with Freud's desire with the desire of the analyst as well. He tries to distinguish, as we mentioned before at the seminar about transference, what was Freud's desire that had to do with the desire of the analyst that began with which psychoanalysis began. And we bear witness also to him trying to understand what was going on with the hysteric neurosis. He gets, I'm sorry, the case of Dora, and he tries to read it again. He does that at the third seminar, as well as on his late works, such as the 17th and so on. And he tries to understand what was going on and what was wrong with what Freud did with the case of Dora. So he tries to understand more things about the hysteric situation, and not only does he understand more, but he mentions, he formulas, he constructs the very own state of the analysis as being more hysteric. So this is very important in the Lacanian psychoanalysis, because when we say that someone is under transference, it has to do with getting closer to one's desire, and that is mentioned as I don't know how to say it in English exactly, hysterization. In Greek it is hysterikopoiesis, so to make someone more hysteric. That has to do with getting to know more about one's own desire. We are not yet at the place of feminine jouissance, but it is something different. But this is something that has to do with a position that is closer to one's own desire. That is very important for the psychoanalytic clinic. Later on in his work with hysterics, Lacan distinguishes the state of hysteria and the state of femininity. He sees hysteria as one of the many forms that the feminine can get. So it's not the only form. And he connects hysteria with the connection and the relation to the phallus. And when we say phallus in the Lacanian psychoanalysis, it has to do with something that is of a certain way of jouissance, something that it is countable, that someone can say things about it, something that is phallic. For example, I don't know how acquainted, I see a lot of people that are very, that have heard everything before, but I wasn't sure about how far to go with the explanation. So I will just make a brief notification about this. When we say phallus, we mean that it is a certain way of jouissance. We have the phallic jouissance and we have the other jouissance. And Lacan tries to come closer with the other jouissance in his late teachings. And what is important here is that he was trying to find it from the beginning. He may have found it later on, but it was always present. So we cannot distinguish early Lacan and late Lacan. So to go back to what is phallic, it is something that has to do with jouissance and something that has to do with a certain function. So I will make an example. Feel free to interrupt in any time that you may find something difficult or anything. For example, when we say that something has a certain way of phallic jouissance, it has to do with, for example, having a degree or a diploma. It is something that may be counted. It is something that it's considered to have a certain place for the other in the society. To go back to the feminine again, for a woman, it can have the, for example, it can have the way, for example, to one way of the feminine could be to get married or to have a kid or to have a good work or something that is countable that has to do with a certain position of a woman. That is what, I don't know if I'm explaining it okay. That is what has to do with the phallic jouissance. It is something that is countable and that women can have access to. One very easy way to understand the phallic and the other jouissance, that is what is important for us today, is to understand this as a place. Lacan used mathematical procedures to explain some of his theories. So I will show you right here. If we have, this is what phallic jouissance looks like. It is like a circle that it is closed, and we can say that there is a circle like that because there is a point outside of the circle that we can refer to. That is what makes the phallic jouissance as a whole, and that is what the male jouissance is about. That's what a man's jouissance is about, and has to do with not only the organ, but also with the procedure. That is why every man can refer to the jouissance as a whole. We can say that men have something in common. Whereas, I will show you the other circle. It is, I don't know if it shows. Okay. So it is not a whole circle. We cannot say that all women are a whole circle because we cannot have in femininity this outside point so that we can have the whole circle that says something about the whole subjects that relate to that. So it is an open circle. That is because we don't have a certain point that can describe a woman. So that is what the famous phrase, the woman does not exist, refer to. I'm sure you have all maybe heard about it. It's a very famous Lacanian phrase that the woman does not exist. And something that may make you laugh here could be that when the feminists first heard about it, they were saying, what does Lacan say? What is this? Why does the woman does not exist? What is this man saying? Is he crazy? So that's very hilarious, but back at the time, it was a very important issue. So, because if this is misunderstood, we can understand it as like there is no woman, but it doesn't refer to that. It refers to there isn't a place that we can say that every woman is the same with the other. Lacan said that there are only women, so there are all the women. we cannot say that there is one woman that describes them all, such as the state that exists in a man.
Dimitra, can you say a little bit more about the point outside the circle?
Yes, of course. So that is referring to Freud's. Lacan says that he made the last modern myth, because all of the myths that are given to us from psychoanalysis, they are ancient myths. They have to do, for example, the Oedipus complex, etc. Freud, on the other hand, he constructing the male neurosis, he constructed the myth about the primitive father. I'm sorry. So he constructed the myth that had to do that when the hypothesis was that that is described in Totem and Taboo, that is the work of Freud. I'm sorry, that is described here in this external point. He constructed the myth that had to do with what was first describing the male neurosis. So I will tell it very shortly. If Penny, if you want to add anything, feel free. He said that there was a father in the primitive times, that he had all the women of the tribe, that is the father of the horde, and he had all the women and could relish every woman, and he had no boundaries, and he had jouissance without boundaries. So Freud hypothesized, he supposed that in order to enter civilization, the sons of the father had to kill the father. The father is described symbolically as this point outside of the circle. And this point outside of the circle could make the exception for every rest man that was now afraid that he would have the revenge of the father. So that is what made the first symbol in Totem and Taboo. So we see what Freud does here. He takes the symbol of totem, you know, the totemic symbols of the past, and he tries to give us a myth that will explain the construction backwards. So this symbolic prehistoric father that we don't even know if he existed, but that is what psychoanalytic construction has to do, does. He symbolically refers it here as the external point of the circle, and that is what connects every man that has the same function inside the circle. Whereas that has to do with making a circle full and having an external point that would define the rest. So that is what is referred to as an external point. There are a lot we can say here, because Lacan not only uses Freud, he also uses mathematics, topology, and he also uses structuralism, language structuralism. So do you want to say anything more?
No, that was very helpful, actually, to give that sort of, imaginable stuff. In other words, from where does this sort of come? What's at least a founding myth of psychoanalysis itself? It's useful. I didn't know that before. So we know things, but there are always gaps. It's especially with the abstractions, to give them some point of reference. So it occurs to me that what Lacan does in formalizing the other jouissance is an answer to Freud's perplexity about what does the woman want, because that's a question about, you know, what else is there. So it seems to turn around all of this. So thank you.
Thank you for your question, and I would really like you to interrupt more and ask more, because it becomes livelier this way. And when somebody talks alone, he may, you know, go on.
Well, I have a comment, if you allow me.
Yes, of course.
Okay, in the way I heard you speaking about the myth, it was very precise and simple. The myth of the primal horde and the primal father. I just want to state that in the myth, women exist because there is a primal father. Okay, so if we replace and not kill the primal father, replace him with the one, not the one who have the women, but the one who desires. Then the counter, how he desires. It's the one who desires is not seeking the completion of his image, of his body, through the objectification of the other, of the woman in this case. Then the woman actually becomes a seeker of her own desire and truth. So the primal father, or the analyst there, it's someone who does not seek the object A in the other. And this is, in my opinion, why the woman does not exist, because it's all masculine in the position. If we seek the object A in the other, we are operating from the masculine position, because it's the feminine jouissance, in the way you described it there, is something beyond the body.
Mm.
So that was.
Thank you very much for your. That's very, very. That's very. I'm sorry, I forget English. That's very, very important to connect the feminine jouissance as something that has to do with women, but it doesn't only has to do with women. It's something with the object, or as you mentioned, that doesn't have to do with the object. So because we will of course refer to that later on, because it is very what Petra said is very important, because very often we see that point of femininity being criticized in civilization. I will continue with that. So if you don't have any other comments about the myth, okay.
I have just one little point
Yes.
on this, and just to, because it's on all this turns. I can't remember exactly in which seminar now, but there's a point where Lacan explicitly says he only takes up woman insofar as she is an object for a man. Mm-hmm. So he really defined what he's looking at, what he's calling woman in this context, is a very a very specific point of view. And I think that relates to what both of you are saying. That's it.
And that is, thank you very much, Penny, because indeed what Petros said is that the masculine position has to do with placing the woman as, we say his phallus, but phallus has also the desire, but it is very different with, but it has to do with an object. It is very different from the feminine position and the place that a woman puts a man. And we will come to that, because it is very oftenly described that for a woman, the partner can get such a place that it can devastate her. So it is a very different position indeed, and it's not the same at all. So to continue, because we have to, what I was trying to present today is just the way that, it's very widely discussed during the time, about feminine jouissance in general, with with all those different kinds of jouissance that we see today, the sexual jouissances that we see today. And I think it's very important to understand that indeed feminine jouissance doesn't only have to do with women. It has to do with the position that one takes. And other than the phallic position, there is a non-whole, as we say it for the open circle. There is a non-whole position that has to do with the other jouissance, that it's referred as the feminine. And I will continue with what Petro said, because it is mentioned in a text by Jacques-Alain that when we talk about women, we tend to talk bad about women. It's a hazard there. There is a hazard there because from the male point of view, the non-whole and the not having, because phallic jouissance is about a woman that is whole, that has a job, or that is a mother, that is a queen, or is but it is not what a woman is about. It's not the femininity. This is not femininity. It's indeed, it's a masculine way to see a woman. I don't know if I'm explaining it exactly, but the femininity has to do with the not whole, with something that goes beyond. And what is important here is to see that despite him being a man, Lacan tried to go beyond and I think that is my personal opinion, that Lacan did that because he was interested in psychotics and the psychotic way from the beginning of his career. He began with the case of paranoia, and his favorite was the Aimé, and his work on this incident with this case of paranoia is what led him to go beyond the phallus from the beginning. And here I would like to connect so that I give time to discuss a clinical situation that I have prepared for you, in time for discussion as well. In his own work, Lacan did what? He tried to go beyond on his own analysis and work. And that is what gave us Lacan. That is what gave us the way to understand better in the 20th seminar. We understand better matters such as what does a woman want, the mysticism, what is at stake with the feminine, what does exist in writing. That's very important as well. And I would like to quote you a little phrase that Lacan mentioned in the 20th seminar that had to do with the function of the writing of the creeds. And he said that by reading his creeds, I don't know if you have ever read the creeds by Lacan. They're very difficult and they're very thick. It's very tied together. So he said that that was his way of others jouissance. And he connects that in the 20th seminar with the jouissance that the mystics and St. John felt in their experiences with Christ. If you have heard the tales of the mystics and their works, they describe a very intense feeling, and they describe a whole experience, a mystical experience that they felt with their connection to Christ. So Lacan mentions them in order to explain that other jouissance that doesn't have to do with the phallus. The phallus and the object, as Petrus mentioned before. We see that, just to conclude, in order to go further with a clinical structure. This is often described in psychosis, unfortunately, in not always in a very easy way in psychosis. But if you have been close with this structure, it's very, very, very interesting to witness the bodily effects of the other jouissance. So I will try to give some time here if you have any questions or comments, because I don't want to be very stiff. If you want me to say more things about the writing, the creed, or the mysticism, we can choose a topic you would like to discuss more.
Well, I have a comment that I'm hearing you and I'm taking notes because you inspire desire. So, if I'm allowed to do a comment on your.
Yes,
okay
of course.
To comment.
Of course.
Okay.
I'm asking them.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it's very nice. You put it there like structured and clear, so it makes me think. So I want to say something about the reading and the writing. The way I heard you there, it's feminine desire writes. It does not read. Reading is on the level of the knowledge of the body, because we've got the phallus there, and it operates only within the fantasy. The fantasy is the body, of course. The writing is on the level of a gnosis that you can access without the body. That's why the object A is not there. So I think here we've got, because you mentioned mysticism and we've got the gnosis there, you cannot have access to mysticism with a body, because it means that you are interpreting the world, the universe, with your fantasy. To have this experience, you have to go beyond the knot itself, which is, the knot is the body centralized around the object A. And that's what I was thinking when you spoke about the mysticism, the way you presented there. That's my comment.
That's very interesting, because it's exactly what has or hasn't have, that doesn't, have to do with the body there. And when I mentioned that woman in the civilization, it's oftenly misunderstood. It has to do with the right to jouissance without being whole. And what you said that was exactly about the feminine desire writing. It's very interesting to read what you're saying, the writing as a bodily function, and that is something that Lacan mentioned about the function of the letter. It's different. He distinguishes the letter from, in the 20th seminar, he distinguishes the letter that has to do with the signifier. And I just wanted to quote something, hearing what you said, Petrus. I was thinking about mentioning this to you, but since you said, I will present it. He makes a brief. He notifies. He makes a word about about Tiresias. You have heard the myth of Tiresias. Tiresias was an ancient a Greek, I don't know how to say, he could see the future.
Diviner.
Oracle. Okay, thank you very much. He could see the future. He was very, very beloved on the ancient Greek mythology. So the ancient Greek gods, they liked Tiresias. They used to go him for predictions, etc. And there is, and Tiresias was transformed, although he was a man, he was transformed into a woman for some period of his life. And the tale says, the myth says, that Hera got very, very angry when they asked Tiresias, who has the better jouissance, who enjoys more? How did you enjoy more, being a man or a woman? And he answered that it was far more being a woman. So Hera got very, very angry that he told that secret. So she punished him because he gave this truth to the world, that the woman desires in much more ways, and the woman enjoys in a much bigger and wider way. It was a scandal, we can say. So I think that is what is at stake with the feminine jouissance, and we see that not only in women, we see that in gay people maybe, and wherever there is a feminine jouissance that it's not acceptable. We see that in male neuroses, that whenever they feel that they lose their thickness, they may get angry. We see that very often in male psychosis, getting angry and having aggressivity. And that right to, and that secret that Tiresias gave away, that the woman desires and that the woman enjoys far more, I think that is what cannot be bared. And that is what causes the scandal, that everyone, even a man, and everyone can desire, and everyone can enjoy, can have jouissance in a way that it is not, that doesn't have to do with what you mentioned earlier, Petros, with the body as a whole and with the organ. So with the phallic organ. So I think that's very important to understand. It was a scandal for everyone. And that is very oftenly what we see in the hatred that has to do with the female way of enjoying. We see that in Eastern religions very, very often, that are trying to not to reveal what is feminine, to hide it. So I will pause again here. I am giving time for comments, questions, or anything else you want. And later on, we will continue with, I would like to present you an analysant of mine that had a very intense experience of female and jouissance that was very new to her, and I chose to present something that I experienced as an analyst as well. So feel free to ask anything, to comment before we continue.
Dimitra, just regarding Tiresias, he was punished for knowing by losing his eyesight. He became blind. That's also very...
Yes, it's a very important remark. Thank you. Because that he could see, so he could not longer see.
Exactly.
He was punished for seeing by not seeing. He's so inside.
Also, I wanted to add that Christianity itself hasn't been very friendly towards women either.
Yes, of course.
Yeah, the Catholic Church acknowledged that women have a soul in the 16th century. So
yes, it's very important what you.
So I think we come from very far away. So it's very difficult maybe for us to articulate an logo, you know, a discourse.
Of course.
Yeah.
That is very, very important what you're saying, Helena, and thank you, because I forgot to mention it. I had it in mind, but there are so many things I want to tell you. So Lacan gave the Hysterics their own discourse. So I think that is, the hysteric discourse is so important. It has so much to do with moving on and making the master work, that Lacan recognized the hysterics, their own discourse.
Yeah, but we had to wait.
Yes.
To be heard.
Yes. Yes, you're totally right. There wasn't, that's exactly what misogyny has to do, because there wasn't even, as we say in psychoanalysis, to hear someone as a subject that means of the unconscious, recognize a different voice. And we still see that, unfortunately. There are many women that are that don't have a voice, that are objects, that are not subjects, that and people that are still subjects, but unfortunately, that was, as you say, Helena, a very widely misconception to the feminine, and that was unfortunately the dominant fantasy of the time, that had to do with religion as well, because it was a male religion. Before that, we had more female religions.
Yeah, but before God, we had a great goddess.
Yes, of course.
Who was always also triadic, with three.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Dimitra.
It's very important what you're saying, because I happen to have done a bit of my own research for religions, indeed. In fact, and yes, first religions were all the societies were they were how we say matriarchy. They were matri. I'm not sure. They had to do with the mother, and yes, thank you, Petros. And it is very interesting, in my opinion, just commenting that after these religions, there was so much fear for the feminine. I mean, we have, chronologically speaking, female religions that had to do with nature, not only female, but indeed women had a different position there. And then we witness globally something transferring to the male fantasy. So fortunately, the women started speaking about it, and they have been speaking, of course, for centuries. But their meeting point with an analyst, someone that had the desire for analysis, started what we today call as psychoanalysis. So yes, I think what you mentioned, Helena, is very, very important. It had been waiting for a long time.
Can I make another comment for Jouissance?
Yes, yes.
Okay. I think the function of Jouissance with this transformation, in Greek they use this, the word transformation that they use for the Greek mysteries was metamorphosis. They have it in English, of course. And another parallel text to read is the Golden Ass, or Apuleius the Ass, which is a comic. It's the first ancient Greek novel mystery sorry, the ancient Greek, the first ancient Greek novel, and it is kind of a comedy about the ancient Greek mysteries, and it describes the two important words related to Tiresias, the anavasis and the katavasis, which was the going down and the going up. I think they're related to the way Jacques-Alain described the act. He described the act as death and resurrection. If there is a death and a resurrection, it means that the body there has a different function. Also with Tiresias, the next comment I want to make is that when he died, in the text, most of the text, they say that his shade, his shadow, was descended to Hades. So there is something there with the feminine, the nobody, the shadow, something is there around Tiresias, and I just remember that when you and Elena were speaking.
Thank you very much.
That's my comment.
Yes, it's very fascinating myth, and it has a lot to analyze, of course, because that is what Lacan did as well. He tried to read with a different way. He tried to read and tried to write. In fact, he tried to write some of these myths in a different way through the linguists of the time and the function of the myths, trying to rewrite them. That's a very, very interesting myth. That not only because of his that he became a woman and he got blinded, and he went to Hades and he got resurrected. He has a lot to say. This myth has a lot to say. Yes.
I have a comment, Dimitra, about when you introduced this part, the discussion with reference to the mystics and Lacan taking up the mystics. And I'm very mindful that in Lacan's consideration of the psychoses, really he was running his differential about whether something was madness or not, was the difference in the relation to language. So where he's talking about Schreber, he sees Schreber as someone who is invaded by the speech of the other. So you see Schreber having these troubles with the push to the woman, etc. And then he makes his differential quite early on in the early chapters. He says basically, well, Schreber is no poet. He's not a mystic. And he starts talking about St. John of the Cross and the mystics there. So you see him really, that's a pivoting point there. And in your discussion today, thank you for this. It's sort of for the first time I could see the hysteric in the interzone between this man who was invaded by the speech of the other and pushed not in an original experience. This is the defining point for Lacan. It's about an original experience. And so for Lacan, it's not that you have strange experiences that makes you mad. It's the way in which you are invaded by the speech of the other. You are ravaged, really, by the way another tries to define you. And you mentioned about the phallic and the organ, and in a certain sense, I don't know how we can avoid it, but there's a conflation between the phallus as organ and language as an organ, which also has distributive effects of jouissance. In other words, how the economy of jouissance functions in the body when it's localized and when it's delocalized in the feminine. So I just wanted to offer those because you've kind of inspired, if you like, a development on the topology of making.
Thank you very much, because yes, what you are saying about Schreber is, thank you very much for the comments, because it is important to see what we may get as jouissance, but it has to do with the body. In the end, I mean, when the body is disrupted, when speech is disrupted, is disrupting the speech of the other. I mean, what you mentioned, Penny, is disrupting the body, and we have bodily effects. Of course, it is not the same as having the effects of jouissance that happen in mystics, or may happen to everyone in general. And I was very touched by what you said, because when I was reading about Schreber, and in the third seminar, and Lacan mentioned that he's in Greek it says it's witness, but it's not only this word is not only about being a witness of the unconscious, but it is also talking about what the unconscious really is. So I think what you mentioned about speech is very, very crucial, and we mustn't forget what we should be aware of in psychosis. I wanted to add in what you said, and in general, that in the late teachings of Lacan, what we see is that structure is really not the crucial point, but it has to do with how one deals with his own jouissance and with his own symptom. And I think it is very, very important to see that what you mentioned about speech, that it is very, very crucial, your contributions, to see that maybe psychoanalysis can deal with it till a certain point.
Can we comment more? Or?
Of course.
Okay. I just remember something about Tiresias. Maybe it helped the conversation, but he's mentioned in Dante's Divine Comedy as well. And he's located in the 8th circle of hell, where they were like all the prophets that they're supposed to see the future in life. And the way, sorry, I don't remember if it's the 7th. I think it's the 8th. I think it was the 8th. It doesn't matter. It's one of the circles of hell. But all of the soothsayers there, all the people in that circle, they had their punishment was to work, but had their heads turned backward because they claimed to see the future when they were alive. Yeah, and yeah, and also with the feminine jouissance, like again inspired from the conversation here, it's if it's something that functions beyond the body and beyond the object A, then what is the place of the death drive? Because the death drive operates within the Borromean knot and around the object A. There is a limit by the pleasure principle only in the Borromean knot. When we've got the feminine jouissance, as it is operated beyond the body, because it operates beyond the object A, meaning that I do not seek the object to complete my specular image in the other, then how can we speak about the death drive? What is the function of the death drive here? It changes, becomes something else. And I think it's the death drive here, since it doesn't have the push of the object A, it becomes like the energy towards the infinite. Whole becomes a threshold, a very common word mentioned in the seminars of Lacan. If we remove the object A from the structure, then we've got, I think I mentioned that, we've got access. Penny said some very important ones, among the many, she says, that the structure is indefinite infinite. And when she said that, I start thinking in terms of, okay, then what blocked that entrance, that threshold? It's the object A. So my question here is, maybe not now, but to think of the death drive and its operation function better at the level of the feminine jouissance. That's just a question for us to think or discuss or whatever. Just to pose it here. Thank you.
I think it is a very important question, and it has to do with what I'm going to present you. This case of this woman, it has a lot of test drive there, and what you mentioned, Petros, with the infinite, I think it's very, very important. I have heard a different case. It's not my analyst, but a different case about an analyst. She was a woman that she had these incidents of so all of a sudden this infinite jouissance that was she felt struck. She felt struck. I'm sorry. She told her analyst. Her analyst described it to us when we were talking about the feminine jouissance, that she had so much amount of infiniteness. All of a sudden, she was walking at the road, and she wasn't psychotic. It wasn't a psychotic phenomenon. She was a neurotic woman, but with a lot of anxiety in her life, and she had this incidence of very sudden, of a very sudden bodily effect of infiniteness that she felt waived. She felt that she was out of her body. She didn't know who she was. She described it. We had the incident, was very, very interesting. And they structured with her analyst a way that she could bear all this incidence of infinite jouissance. She began telling herself her name, what date was, and that she was where she was living, trying to all this the effect of floating that she was describing. And I'm repeating, it wasn't a psychotic symptom, this one. So this infiniteness that you are referring reminded me of this incident of this neurotic woman with this incidence of jouissance. And before moving to this very interesting case that I bear witness to as an analyzer and as an analyst. I'm sorry. What I also remember from another incident of a woman was these headaches that she had that could not be explained. She was very happy with her life. She had everything she ever wanted. She was so happy, but she had these little somatic incidents of migraines that were coming from time to time, and she couldn't explain them in any way. She had gone very far with her analysis, and something from this infiniteness that you described may lead to a death drive or something that has to do. It's a very important question. I'm not sure I can say more about it other than some clinical incidents that I have heard.
This suggests a symposium all on its own.
Yes. Yes. It's just because it's very how can I say it? It's a very original thought. It's something very interesting to connect it. Anything else? Someone that would like to speak?
Yeah, I just thought of, I don't know if it's really relevant, but years ago I read a book about an ethnographic study in a village of the early 20th century in France. Now, what was very interesting was that the same woman who brought the children into the world, the Imea, forgot how you say this in English, was also the woman who prepared the dead, who lay out the dead for their burial, and who also initiated the young girls of the village at the time of getting their menstrual cycle, the art of keeping the house. So we have, this is a woman at the threshold of life and death. And this was until the early 20th century in France. So yeah, traditionally, a woman has been connected to these passages of life and death. And the ritual passage, of course, to the age of fecundity. So I don't know if it has something to do with this, but when Petros spoke of the death drive, I mean, the feminine jouissance, the infinity, and then the death drive, it just came like a thunderbolt in my head. I said, okay, I will mention it. So
thank you very much. It's very, all of this that you're describing, they are very, it's very interesting to see how it is connected and how it is that when we talk about life, we talk about death as well. So speaking about life and has to do with speaking about death as well. They're connected. I don't know if I'm grabbing it in exactly, but I think they're very important remarks to. And what Penny said about having a different discussion about it is, I think it's interesting to see how they are connected. They're connected in this woman that I will present you. It's very fascinating. I got fascinated, so that's why I wanted to share it with you. Maybe I can continue and we can have another time in the end to talk about the death drive and feminine jouissance and whatever else you want to share with us.